I think Zangief feels a lot stronger than he is. Especially, he just got nerfed again. So I think it already dropped him a little bit. Okay, so I have been seeing a lot of people, FGC Birds as the main people, getting asked who they think is the top 5 currently in Street Fighter 6. I have my opinions. I don't know if they're the best opinions, but they're mine. They're mine, so, you know, they matter to me. But anyway, yeah, I'm a Street Fighter 6 player with a lot of characters in Mastered. I usually stick around 1600 MR. So definitely not the best player, but I got my knowledge in this game, alright? And personally, I wanted to talk about where I think a lot of these characters would place. Instead of just saying a straight up top 5 though, what I'd like to do is talk about who I think is probably pretty obvious contenders for top 5, but then go down and talk about who I think would be right after that. Or instead of being like top 10, being at least like they could be the other characters that would possibly be top 5 as well. Because I do feel like a lot of times we rate characters, we do rate them off based off how much we see them or how much they're in the meta right now. So it can kind of feel like, oh, this character's just better than this character. But I actually don't agree with that, and that's why I want to say what I think a basic top 5 would be. And then other than that, I just want to talk about why these characters are good rather than just talk about where they should be and that they're better than other characters. But I think the best way to start is probably just go into where I think the top 5 is right now in Street Fighter. And this top 5 list is not in order, so I'm not going to say any of these characters are better than the other characters. I just think that they're all at least considered the best currently, or at least in my opinion, I think they're the best. So I'm not saying Rashid is better than Akuma or anything like that, but I do think that they're around each other. So currently, I'm going to start up with some meta characters right now. I do agree with a lot of the Japanese players with where they put people on tier lists, where I do agree that certain characters like Ed even should be ranked pretty high, considering that they're so useful in the meta. It doesn't mean they're like a broken character, but they're very useful, and they've been utilized in such a strong way now that so many players are playing them. And so many players have figured out what makes them what makes them so strong, and have figured out so many options of theirs that work, that I feel like it actually makes them even stronger because the information is out there. So it's much more easily accessible than a character like, Marissa, something like that, where you kind of have to scour the internet for information on that character since not as many people play her. So let's talk about characters like that. I think an easy pick to put in top 5, I think there's no debate. I think Akuma currently is the best Shoto in the game right now. I don't think Ken is bad in any way. I actually don't think Ryu's bad in any way as well. I think Ryu's incredibly strong right now. But I do think it's pretty obvious to sit there and say Akuma's probably the best Shoto right now. He has a lot of properties with his fireballs that other Shotos don't have. He's just safer. And he has Air Fireball, which is another property that he's allowed to use that none of them are able to use, which is a really strong utility to punish people who want to try to anti-air his jump-ins. On top of that, he can also bait out people trying to anti-air with his Demon Flip and cancel that. Demon Flip in itself is really strong, so he's able to get even more plus frames on top of mix-up options, incredibly strong Charge Fireball, incredibly good damage, and overall just really good frame data. So yeah, this character deserves to be top 5 in my personal opinion. Next to him, I think, in no particular order, is obviously Rashid. Rashid is a character that has probably single-handedly defined the beginning of the meta of Season 2 of Street Fighter 6, and I don't think anybody saw it coming, because when this character first came out, I don't think he was honestly too different, if really that different at all, but I think people hadn't exactly figured out what made him so strong. He was a character that was very good, but his buttons weren't like as obviously as like broken as people would say as like characters like Ken. But a lot of that goes into what I was talking about previously when I was saying that I feel like when certain players have already like figured out characters, or at least like what they think is figured out, it makes that character feel even stronger. So, like, you have enough time with a character, you realize, oh, okay, this character is amazing, because now we know all the options. We know what makes them good, we know what makes them bad, so we have a lot more information on them. And on top of that, it also means the information is much more easier to attain. So if you want to play that character, it's not that hard. I mean, if you're a Rashid main, there's millions of videos for tech for this character. So he just has such amazing options. He has every Rashid probably like does different things, you know, like every one of them uses different tech. So there's just so many things that this character can do. And obviously his level 2 is probably the strongest super in the game. Just giving him the utility to just kind of get away with whatever he wants to. It allows him to push the opponent in the corner. It allows him to reset neutral. It allows him to control neutral. Just an overall an amazing option. And on top of that, I actually feel like even without it, this character is really good as well. So there's no debate that I think he's got to be top 5. I personally, a lot of people, before I get to some of these other picks, I want to talk about Bison. A lot of people disagree with this. I don't. I think when you think about the logic of what I was just talking about with how certain characters feel really strong once you get them figured out, I think certain characters like Rashid, who have, you know, they're just very deep as a character. There's a lot to them. When you spend a lot of time, and there's a lot of time that's passed since that character's been out, a lot of people are able to go through and have that information. They're like, oh, I figured out this character. Bison came out and was almost immediately usable in tournaments. Like, he was immediately being used in tournaments. Now, I know that, like, some of his stuff was pretty, like, knowledge checky, where, like, oh, you know, like, he just has some weird options. They kind of interact with you in a weird way, like his stomp that sometimes you don't know has a second hit when you're, you know, when you're first playing. There's some weird stuff he does that I don't think people were ready for. But people trained. You know, people are still training to beat this character, and he's still being used by some of our top players. Zhao Hai, you know, one of our recent tournament winners, used this character to absolute perfection in such a short period of time as well since the character's been out, and he already is cooking crazily in tournaments. I'm not saying I think he's the best character in the game. I'm not saying I think he's broken, but currently where he's at, I think if he's strong enough to be used already by these amazing players, I think without much problems, you know, being had by them, I think it's pretty obvious this character should be top 5. And the other reason is just because I feel like he has such a solid game plan that is pretty easy to pick up. So I feel like one of the things that makes him such a strong character is that while he's such an oppressively strong character, he actually isn't that hard to play. You know, like his setups are very easy to understand. His combos are really not that hard, and they do a billion like damage. So I think this character is a good like starter character. You'll see a lot of people who play this character and will get to higher ranks than they probably would with other characters. Not that he's broken, but he's definitely easier to play at that high level because I think he's easier to understand. His game plan's really simple, you know, compared to certain characters that are kind of open-ended. Because his plan is simple, you know, I want to get in, I want to put a bomb on you for plus frames or for damage. You know, and that's basically it. Either other than that, I'm going to be using my very strong neutral options to spacing trap you and punish you. Really strong character. I think he's top 5. Other than that, I think currently top 5 wise, this is pretty debatable, but I currently think Ed is up here. I think Ed is the meta right now. These people right here, in my opinion, are the meta, and I think Bison is Bison, Akuma, Rashid, Ed are kind of leading it right now. Well, Rashid has had a lot of time to cook, you know. I think Ed has finally had a lot of time. And I think when Ed first came out, he was a character that a lot of people viewed to be not as good as he is. A lot of people just kind of assumed that he was like a mid-tier, high mid-tier, because he's very weird, and his buttons that are good are not the typical Street Fighter 6 buttons that are good. You know, like a lot of characters in this game that are really good, they have really strong like crouch medium kick, low forward options like that get in and then get a ton of damage that way. Whereas he has really good pokes, but some of his normals don't hit exactly the same as others. They're slower, you know, like one of his fastest punishes for a while on drive reversal before they added the most recent patch where you could throw on drive reversal was his low light, I think it was light kick. And so like he just didn't really get a lot of damage off of certain things. So I think options like that made him seem like he wasn't as strong as he is. Meanwhile, this character is single-handedly, well, not single-handedly, but he is helping control this meta right now. We have incredibly strong Japanese players coming in the game and destroying tournaments with this character. Very strong American players as well, like Brian F. I think this character just does so much right, and whereas he does have some bad matchups, I think he just has so many strong options that cover, like, you know, himself in all of these matchups where he can still win. I think he can still win in all of his matchups. It's just some of them are pretty difficult. This is where I get to the point where I think the list starts to be a bit more debatable. I think whereas these characters are in there. I think a lot of these other characters are going to have to be possible top 5s. What I want to do is I'm going to add a row below. And I'll say for this one I'll say for this list, I think these characters are strong, but I don't think they're top 5. And what that means is, I think for possible top 5, it's characters that would take this top 5 list. Because currently, I think, without changing, I think these top 4 people, they gotta be in this list. And another person needs to go in there, but I think it could be any of these other characters that I'm going to talk about. So before I talk about those characters, I want to talk about some characters that I think don't really have a chance at being top 5. I think Kimberly is a pretty obvious choice. She's a character that can feel strong at low ranks, definitely a noob crusher, and very strong players can take this character, along with another character, Manon, to pretty high ranks. But for the most part, I do think they struggle with utilizing a lot of their options to win most of their matchups. And I think a lot of these characters, another character I can throw in here would be Lily. I think a lot of these characters definitely struggle with certain matchups, and when they struggle, they really struggle, you know? So, like, they might have some winning matchups that they're really winning, but a lot of their matchups are not exactly in their favor. And I think matchups is one of the easiest ways to decide how strong a character is. It's not the entire deciding factor, but when their matchups are as bad as they are, and they're relying on certain options that aren't as good as these top-tier characters, I definitely think it's easy to say they would not be top 5. Another character that I think we can talk about would go in a different place would be Jury. So I actually feel like Jury is also a possible top 5 contender. We've seen Jury play amazingly well. We've seen Jury win Capcom Cup, and I'm not saying that's because the character's broken or anything, but even though there's not as many Juries, I feel like, as we're seeing, the Jury players that we do see are insanely good, and I do genuinely feel like this character has a lot that works. I do feel like, if anything, I think with time, this character's felt a little bit weaker because we've seen a lot of people play her. So I think we've had a lot of time to practice against her, a lot of time to, get knowledge against her. But I still think she's an incredibly strong character that could hold her own against a lot of these other top 5 characters, Alright. It really shows how good I am when those bottom 3 kick my ass. Well, they're knowledge check characters, So, like, even I get crushed by a lot of these characters, Like, another character I could throw in here would be, like, Jamie, right? Like, Jamie he has, like, the lowest damage in the game. Really good buttons. Overall, I think this character is still usable. When I put these characters in No Way, it doesn't mean that they're not good characters. This game is so well-balanced that realistically you could win any match with any of these characters against any of these characters. Like, if you're playing Jamie, you could beat Akuma. You could beat Bison. It's been done millions of times over. The gap between these characters is honestly so slim. The reason why I even separate them in different categories here is more just to give a little bit more appreciation for some of the characters that I think are just a little bit closer to getting that top 5. And the characters that are in no way do I think they're bad characters. I more just don't see a world that they would be considered top 5, Along with them, I think E Honda. E Honda actually, I think, was even stronger before the recent changes. So yeah, I think he's got to be down here with these other people. I would say a lot of people would put Dalsum down here. I think he doesn't really have a good shot at top 5, but I would actually say I think a good Dalsum player can control the space really well. He does have some pretty bad matchups, but some of his best matchups are with some of the better characters in the game. So I don't think this character's top 5. But I do think he's still pretty strong. Along with that, I actually think Blanca can also go up there. I think Blanca is a character that, under the right hands, this character can be insanely good. Like, they can feel so dang oppressive that they can control the entire space of the game. They will not allow certain players to move. The mix-up potential with this character is insane. Level 2 Blanca is the strongest character in the game, so I think even though this character doesn't get as much representation, similar to Jury, when they do, I think it's insane what they can actually do, Another character that's in that same category, I think, is actually Guile. I think Guile is a character that is he has a very hard... I think the best way to describe it is Guile's a very hard character to learn, whereas his game plan seems simple. His combo routes are pretty hard. And I do think he takes a lot of like optimizing to make him like where he's top 5. I think a lot of low rank Guiles can be like noob stompers, but when they get into those high ranks, they struggle like a lot to fight like normal Shotos and stuff like that with people who are really confident with their movement, their blocks. I mean, with their defense and stuff like that. Similar to Blanca, under the right hands, I do think Guile is a very strong contender for a possible, like top best of the character, best character in the game type deal, where I think he could possibly be a top 5 pick. Along with that, I do think we have a lot of other characters that could go in this category as well. Another character should be on this list. I'm going to put them right here. So, Ken, I think is possible top 5. I think a lot of people would probably get mad for me not just immediately putting him in top 5, but I think if we're talking about where this character has had a lot of time to cook in the oven, and because of that, a lot of his information is out there, I think on the one side, like I talked about previously, it means that we have a lot of information about this character, so he's easy to pick up, But on the other hand, he has been getting considered like one of the best characters, if not the best character, since day 1. So I think almost everybody at this point, everybody and their mom should know how to deal with Ken, I think everybody should have at least figured out how to deal with Ken. And I'm not saying that's the only reason why I think he's below here. I just also think that there's a better Shoto in the game. And if we're going to talk about a top 5, there being a Shoto, I think it's Akuma, and I don't think it's Ken. Though I do think Ken is very close. Like I said with a lot of these other characters, I do think the list is incredibly close. Now I want to talk about Chun-Li. I feel like Chun-Li is pretty close by as well. I think she's also a possible contender. I think Season 1, Chun was a pretty strong contender for being top 5 as well. I think she was a really strong character. For a while I thought she was like maybe A tier, maybe top of A tier. I think she's at least top of A tier now, around where like Jury is. I think it's funny, they're actually balanced pretty like well around each other. But I don't think Season 2 Chun is exactly at the top of that list. But I do think she's still a possible contender. Under the right hands, a player like Moke, this character can still be insanely good. One of the characters that I think actually should skip most of this list, and that is Cammy. I think Cammy is... I don't know if Cammy has been an underrated choice. I don't think she is. I'm pretty sure Cammy is... I remember I checked the tournament recently, and it saw that tournament-wise, I think Cammy is like one of the most picked characters in Street Fighter 6 for tournaments. She has been talked to death about basically being like such a strong character, but this character has almost everything that you need to be a good Street Fighter 6 character. She really can get away with almost anything. She's good at noob stomping, but she's also good at stomping like pros as well. You'll see people like Punk when they play this character. They can just do whatever they want. Like it's just... Cammy's an amazing character, and I really don't see too many faults with this character at all, so that's why I feel like she's got to go up here. Alright, now I want to talk about some other characters. I won't go too into detail, but I do feel like it's pretty obvious where their placement should be. I think Aki is not exactly top 5 worthy. I think she's very strong, especially after patch changes, but I still wouldn't put her top 5. Along with Ryu, I think Ryu's great, and under the right hands, like I said previously, any character can be taken to that top level, but I do think his options are a little bit worse than a lot of these other characters up here. I actually think Luke should go in this list as well. I think Luke has been getting downplayed a lot since his nerfs, but since that patch change, man, it's not a crazy buff up there, but it's still a buff. This man was already, in my opinion, still like top 10, and I think he's back up there. So yeah, this character's still insane. In fact, I'd probably put him like right here. DJ is another character I think was already up here, but around the time that the changes happened, he got nerfed a little bit. I don't think it affected him that greatly, but I still think that, he's not exactly top 5 right now. I think I would have put him possibly like top 10 Season 1, and I think it's not... I think it's fair for me to give him this placement right here for Season 2. I think he's a little downplayed. I still think he's really strong. That's all I'll say. I would probably put Marissa down here. I think a lot of people would say that Marissa... if I'm going to put Dawson on this list, I'll put Marissa in here. Now I want to talk about JP. Dude, JP's crazy, bro. This character was already good, and then they buffed him. They buffed him again. They felt bad for him, and they buffed him again. I think JP is insanely good again, and I think he has a possible chance of rising back up to where he was before. Where, in my opinion, I think Season 1, he was the best character in the game. I don't think it was super far away from like characters like Luke and Ken and stuff like that, but I still think he was the best character in the game. So I think he's coming back. That's all I'm gonna say. I think he's making a strong comeback. It's an insanely good character, and the buffs are definitely helping, and he was already good like after the nerfs. So Zangief. No, Zangief is not top 10. Zangief is not top 5. Zangief is another very strong character, similar to a lot of these characters in here. In fact, I'll fix this list up. You know, I think Zangief feels a lot stronger than he is. Especially, he just got nerfed again, so I think it already dropped him a little bit. When this character got buffed recently, I think a lot of people were saying that he was like top 5 or just the best character in the game. When you would watch a lot of like new Street Fighter players, they would put him at the top. I don't think he is. I don't. I really don't. I think he is very strong for what his archetype is, you know, of being a grappler. And I think he's one of the strongest grapplers we've ever seen in a fighting game. But I still think the archetype in itself of being a grappler is not... It's not a strong one, you know? It's something that a good player can take to very, you know, strong levels. But if you're comparing the options to other characters, well-rounding, you know, like talking about their well-rounded matchups, stuff like that, I can't put him any higher because I genuinely, I think even though he's a really strong character, he's just not as consistent, you know? He's not as consistent as a lot of these other characters up here. I think possible top 5, most of these characters, they're pretty dang consistent for the most part, and that's why I think that they're pretty, you know, it's pretty easy to say where these would be. Now, Terry just came out, so to be fair, I don't think I could exactly say where Terry is. I'm going to put him somewhere, but I don't know if it's exactly set. I think Terry is not someone we're going to immediately see winning tournaments. So I don't think he is just yet a possible top 5. I would say currently I think he's still strong, but we don't know. We still need to figure out a lot of this character before we figure out where he'd be placed. Currently I'm just putting him here because I think it's somewhere around the middle, and while I do think this is a strong character, we don't know everything yet. So I'm not going to act like I know where he should be. So that's currently where I would place him. Yeah, that's my personal top 5 list right now. I do think that this is a very subjective thing overall, so again, it's all opinionated, you know, and I'm not a pro player, so it's hard to do tier lists like this, especially when you're talking about the meta, if you're not even involved in the meta, you know? So I played a lot of Rashid this last season, but again, I was playing in Master, kind of low-ranked Master as well, like 15, 1600. So my opinions are not what the pros are thinking, but from what my experience is on ranked, from watching every single tournament event, talking and watching all of the videos that a lot of these pro players put out, and learning, talking to some of them in person, this is where I currently think top 5 is for Street Fighter and where the characters are currently sitting. A lot of these characters possible top 5 I think are pretty interchangeable. I think people closer to the top are much more likely to be decided to be put in top 5, but a lot of the characters being right next to each other, I think they're pretty interchangeable. It's not until you like start talking about Cammy and Blanca that I'm like, yeah, I think they're a little bit further away from each other. You know, like I think Cammy and DJ are a little bit further away from each other, you know? But anyway, yeah, that's going to be it. That's my opinion for the day. So hope you guys found this entertaining. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and that's going to be it for me today. So peace.